While Michael Myers takes the Halloween of 2023 off to establish his new Halloween cinematic universe, and no, I am not kidding about that this time, both producer Jason Blum and director David Gordon Green have moved on this spooky season to another rebooted trilogy of sequels, this time for William Friedkin's 50-year-old horror classic, with Ellen Burstyn returning at age 90 to star, or rather make an extended cameo, in The Exorcist Believer. And despite the $400 million investment from Universal and Blumhouse on The Exorcist rights, their new trilogy has gotten off to a rocky start at the box office, up against the unlikely duo of Taylor Swift and Martin Scorsese, and now landing on VOD 2 weeks after theaters before Halloween is even over. But angry horror fans, as well as the angry spirit of William Friedkin, can be comforted to know that he and William Peter Blatty didn't live to see this latest failed follow-up, after they had to suffer through the first and perhaps the very worst of the Exorcist sequels way back in 1977, with Exorcist II: The Heretic. With Friedkin and Blatty too busy with lawsuits against Warner Brothers and each other for profit and credit over the first Exorcist, the second Exorcist would enlist the directorial eye of the British auteur of Deliverance and Excalibur, John Boorman. Despite Boorman having passed on making the first movie for finding it, quote, rather repulsive, and having just come off directing a red-diapered Sean Connery in the baffling sci-fi epic Zardoz. Still, with Boorman bringing back both Linda Blair and Max von Sydow alongside an award-winning cast of newcomers, then surely he would make a sequel that would also have audiences fleeing from the theater like the first movie. Not out of fear this time, but rather out of anger towards the Warner Brothers executives. According to this hilarious story from William Friedkin about some studio heads who dropped in on an Exorcist II screening to gauge the public's rather poor opinion of the film.
A guy stood up in the audience. The people who made this piece of shit are in this room! And somebody else said, Where are they? These guys got up. The heads of the studio. They get outside, no cars, and they were chased down the street.
So The Heretic would drop off after its huge opening weekend at the box office to end up with a financial haul and a critical reception far behind that of The Exorcist, with William Peter Blatty laughing alongside the audience at the sequel's New York premiere, and William Friedkin calling the few minutes he saw a stupid mess made by a dumb guy with a demented mind. Now that audiences are saying much the same thing about the latest Exorcist follow-up, it's time for me to finally tackle one of the allegedly worst sequels ever made to what is considered the scariest movie ever made. And yes, JoBlo subscribers, having just seen Exorcist Believer myself on VOD before recording this review, I can indeed confirm that this film's final act, with all the different faiths getting together to perform the exorcism, is the exact same plot device that was used in the final act of the Exorcist parody movie I did for my show 5 years ago, Repossessed.
You've got to bring everyone together.
So congratulations to you, David Gordon Green. You've somehow given me a newfound reappreciation for Repossessed. Oh dear God, what am I saying? What an excellent day for some alcoholism, as we wash down our trick-or-treat candy with some holy water for the awfully good drinking game. Take a shot or drink as the credits open like the first one did over the sounds of tribal wailing, which to the blind ear sounds like Yoko Ono doing a cover of Pink Floyd's The Great Gig in the Sky after taking an edible dipped in ayahuasca. Then the film opens in South America, amidst an exorcism performed by our new hero priest of this story, Father Philip Lamont, played by the legendary Richard Burton.
I heal the sick.
Silencio! Silencio!
Who only took this role to pay for his second divorce from Elizabeth Taylor, and is often seen sweating from his off-screen alcoholism that he enabled frequently on the set. Well, turns out using vodka instead of holy water doesn't really work when this demon woman knocks over a shelf of candles that burns down the hut around them, as well as herself. Though her visibly transparent ghost hands should be just fine. Do not despair, people. I'm sure the good Lord will see fit to save this poor woman from the flames. Oh, shit, never mind. Sorry the exorcism didn't work. Make sure you build the Vatican. Don't tell them I fucked up again. Bye! Father Lamont is called all the way over to the Vatican, where he meets with his holiest higher up, the Cardinal, Wednesdays at 9 after The Equalizer on CBS, played by Casablanca actor Paul Henreid in his final on-screen role, who has tasked Lamont with investigating the mysterious circumstances behind the death of their mutual friend and fellow priest, Father Lancaster Marin. Now that word of Marin's exorcism in America has gotten out and led to accusations against him of heresy against the church.
Some go so far as to suggest that he was a Satanist.
Satan has become an embarrassment to our progressive views.
Well, seeing how poorly that dialogue is aged in the past half-century, no wonder Father Lamont is having a crisis of faith against a God that will not allow him to stop drunkenly fucking up exorcisms.
Today, wherever I look, I see only evil. Evil. Evil is gaining.
But Lamont must summon the strength to investigate his old friend's death and fly to New York City, the new home of the innocent girl whose body was freed from Satan by Father Marin, Regan MacNeil, played again by the now teenage Linda Blair, who's been moved to New York by her actress mother Chris into a swanky mirrored apartment alongside one of Chris's assistants from the first movie, Sharon Spencer, played again by Kitty Wynn, because Chris MacNeil is busy overseas with filming another movie.
She feels guilty. Away all the time.
But just some things your mother didn't have time to do before she went on location.
Which is just a fancy way of saying that Ellen Burstyn refused to come back. They would have to pay her an obscene amount of money to bring her back to this franchise for a useless cameo. But when is that gonna ever happen?
It's because I'm not a member of the damn patriarchy.
Not to worry though, her place is taken by another Oscar-winning actress, Louise Fletcher, trading in her Nurse Ratched costume to play a far less evil mental health doctor named Jean Tuscan, who treats Regan inside of this children's psychiatric institute that's designed with even more mirrors and windows that makes it look like a Stanley Kubrick wet dream, yet cannot get this girl to remember what happened to her on that fateful night back in '73.
I remember being very sick and having nightmares.
Those bad dreams are still inside you.
There's nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with me.
So now that Father Lamont has flown in to get Regan to remember that night himself to clear Father Marin's name, Dr. Tuscan breaks out a revolutionary technology to access Regan's mind that begins this movie's descent into batshit insanity.
It can put us in a deep state of hypnosis, and then we could look at those bad dreams together.
In other words, this walkie-talkie with a set of blinking lights attached to it basically works like that Elon Musk Neuralink bullshit crossed over with the plot of Inception. This hypnosync machine makes our actors roll their eyes back into their head, just like they did when they first read this movie's script, and helps them view a flashback to the first movie's exorcism. With Max von Sydow back under the old age makeup to return as Father Marin, Linda Blair now replaced by a body double after refusing to undergo that demon makeup again, and Jason Miller telling the producers to fuck off until they call him back for the only good Exorcist sequel.
Father, please, bring her back.
I'm sure you baffled viewers out there are making the same face as Richard Burton right now. Dr. Tuscan is getting a psychic heart massage from demonic Regan at the same time Father Marin is having his heart attack in 1973, while she's in sync with Father Marin in an effect straight out of a Queen music video, while Max von Sydow, recreating his death from the first movie, now looks more like old-age Martin Short faking a heart attack in Clifford, the sequel to the scariest movie ever made, ladies and gentlemen.
What happened?
It was horrible. Utterly horrible. And fascinating.
Well, the viewers of this movie surely do agree with you, Richard, but can you not stare into the camera? Richard! Can someone please sober him up? I think he's been getting too deep into the holy water again.
Utterly horrible.
Father Lamont soon finds himself in a panic when Regan does a drawing of him with flames next to his face.
The flames. They're getting bigger.
Flames?
On the side of my face.
Which I guess leads him and Dr. Tuscan down to a burning box in the basement that he tries to put out by hitting it with a wooden crutch that will just end up catching fire itself, while she stops in place with a fire extinguisher to notice that his face next to the spreading fire kind of looks like this picture Regan drew of him. It's hard to imagine a movie that's so padded out with dull exposition dialogue would still manage to make no coherent sense. We next find Sharon flying back over to the MacNeil's old home in Georgetown, D.C. to give Father Lamont a guided tour of the haunted house.
I couldn't bear to be near her afterwards.
You're willing now.
I stayed away. 2 haunted years gone out of my mind.
I'm sorry, where did all this backstory for this character come from, who had so little to do with the main plot of the first movie? Are we gonna find out that she and that German housekeeper guy secretly had a baby together? Then it's back to the mind-sync machine so that Lamont can analyze Regan's visions in her sleep that she's been getting from her old pal Captain Howdy of Father Merrin's younger days as a missionary in Africa, which later provided the basis for Rennie Harlan and Paul Schrader's failed prequels.
This young boy, they need his help against the locust swarm.
Merrin observes a young boy named Kokumo, no relation to the Beach Boys song, while he's trying to make a swarm of locusts flee from his village and ends up getting swarmed by them. Then Merrin finding out the boy is possessed by the very same demon who'd later take over Regan, who despite identifying as the devil last time, is actually one of his legion of demonic minions, known by the name that you readers of the original Exorcist novel already know.
I am Pazuzu.
Pazuzu. Pazuzu.
Even with Pazuzu's silly name and even sillier form as a locust puppet that's posing for the Silence of the Lambs poster, he can still wreak some demonic damage upon these fleeing townspeople, while Father Merrin climbs up with Kokumo to a holy temple for his exorcism. After Merrin's exorcism on Kokumo turns the boy back into his regular form as R&B superstar Seal, Father Lamont flies alongside Pazuzu to showcase these quite impressive sets that stand in for Africa, as well as reveal the location of the now adult Kokumo, played by the one and only James Earl Jones, dressed like he's going to play Mufasa a third time, now in the Lion King Broadway musical. I'm sorry, did I just see multiple Tony Award winner James Earl Jones turning into a fucking leopard?
He jumped right at me.
Well, why the hell didn't Father Merrin call upon this guy last time to assist him and Damien Karras in Regan's exorcism?
Your mother sucks cocks in hell.
Speaking of Regan, Linda Blair is one of the few sane things about this movie, as it's nice to see Regan having a semi-normal childhood after all the shit Pazuzu put her body through last time, alongside such kids at this psychiatric hospital as a non-verbal autistic girl named Sandra, played by a pre-Different Strokes Dana Plato. That's right, people. Regan MacNeil now has the power to make autistic children speak.
She's talking.
I'm sure this movie will handle autism as a plot point way better than The Predator did.
What's the matter with you? I was possessed by a demon. Oh, it's okay. He's gone.
After all the trauma that she endured in that possession, Regan just mentioned it to this little girl with the casualness of mentioning her broken hand from a rafting accident. Show this little girl your stomach scars next. I'm sure she'll really be making some noise. Even funnier is when Regan and Lamont meet up inside a history museum to discuss some secret information about Father Merrin that I'm sure had William Peter Blatty laughing extra hard at that premiere.
Do priests believe in ESP?
The French priest tried to shut down, thought that we'd all come together eventually in some sort of mental telepathy. Father Merrin himself believed that with modern scientific research it could happen quite soon.
What in God's holy name are you blathering about?
Yes, indeed. The devout Father Lancaster Merrin was secretly a huge fan of ESP, the so-called Sixth Sense, which has since been debunked as pseudoscience bullshit after a bunch of bored housewives got into it back in the early 70s. That's just about as ludicrous as finding out Father Karras was also a Pulitzer-winning playwright in his downtime. Actually, John Boorman had the unfortunate dishonor of contracting a fungal infection on set called San Joaquin Valley fever. and had to hand over much of the direction and rewrites to Boorman's future Excalibur co-writer Rosbo Pallenberg, who's listed in the credits as a creative associate. Well, it's certainly creative to have this scene of Lamont searching in Africa for the grown-up Kokumo being intercut with Regan MacNeil while she is busy tap dancing in her high school's dance recital? Is this real life? I am just as baffled as Linda Blair herself was that she's being asked to tap dance for a sequel to The Exorcist.
John Boorman comes to me and he said, I think Regan should tap dance. What?
Back in Africa, the townspeople begin accusing Father Lamont of being a Satanist himself and cast the first stone at his head. That is felt by poor Regan while she's mentally synced with him back in America, then feeling every single rock after that hitting Lamont's body, before she falls off the stage and hopefully gets attended to by Dr. Sam Loomis, who knows a thing or two about children haunted by evil.
You know where he is, Cookie Woman.
This is pure New Age insanity that's far away from the advice that Stanley Kubrick gave to his friend John Boorman of how a successful Exorcist sequel would have to be more graphic and scarier than the original, while Boorman went the opposite direction to make a sequel that would serve as a, quote, riposte to the original film's ugliness and darkness that was positive and about good. We'll just ask David Gordon Green how well that went over with his Exorcist sequel, because without Friedkin's realistic ugliness or Blatty's darkly humorous dialogue, this sequel is 2 hours of boring exposition or pointless travel sequences, with our old awfully good pal, the late great Ned Beatty, making a pointless cameo as Burton's friendly pilot.
I know every holy place in Africa. Ecumenical Edwards, they call me. It's nice to know you, Father.
The only reason that I can think Ned Beatty is here for 3 minutes tops is that John Boorman wanted his next movie with him to be less strenuous on his butthole than Deliverance was. Hell, even Repossessed made way better usage of Ned Beatty than this, though the same can't be said for his poor little dog, Foo-Foo. Finally, Lamont walks into a cave to find the one they call Kokumo, which I presume translates into stupid locust costume. Look at poor James Earl here, looking less like Darth Vader, and more like he's dressed for Halloween as Guillermo del Toro's Jiminy Cricket.
Prove your faith, Kosuba.
If Pazuzu comes for you, I will spit a leopard.
I'm sure him spitting out this cherry tomato instead of a leopard will work just as good. I think the Vatican spending the Lord's money to send priests out on Indiana Jones adventures is probably not going to help their PR image.
Can I help you?
Then Lamont looks up to find Kokumo, now dressed up in his other Halloween costume as Sherman Klump, to lead the father through his own scientific institute, filled to the brim with, what else? Locust.
Evil swarm sweeps relentlessly over the earth. Evil breeding evil by contact.
Looks like Phil Donahue throwing up in a tuba.
I just think John Boorman got high watching a Locust documentary on PBS one night and rewrote it into the script. As it happens that the noise of these locust wings flying together is what's been summoning Pazuzu onto the earth. Because at this point, why the fuck wouldn't it be?
She has been evolved to resist the rushing of the wings. We like to call her the Good Locust.
Yes, I am such a big fan of Freddie Highmore's fantastic performance on The Good Locust.
I am a locust, Dr. Kokumo. I am a locust. While Father Lamont gets back from Africa, now dressed like a pimp, Regan is escaping from the psychiatric hospital while sneaking out the synchronizer, and the two reunite at the History Museum where he tells her that Regan has the same psychic powers that Kokumo does after Pazuzu left both of their bodies.
You have a great gift. Keep it from evil.
And the ghost of Father Merrin telepathically tells Lamont that Regan and Kokumo signify a new breed of humanity where everyone has telepathic powers. I wish that I was kidding!
You must take my place. She is precious, and I entrust her to you.
Lamont then suddenly walks out onto the street with Regan chasing right after him while still wearing her nightgown, as the two take a train over to DC, followed by a bus ride over to the abandoned MacNeil house for one last satanic confrontation, with Richard Burton yet again drunkenly looking off screen like he just heard that the wet bar on set just ran dry.
Leave her alone.
She belongs to me.
Get going. The girl has to get home.
And I need to get over to the local watering hole so I can have a drinking contest alongside Russell Crowe as the Pope's exorcist. Dr. Tusken and Sharon Spencer chase after Lamont and Regan in spite of the many satanically induced distractions that keep holding up their trip, while Lamont and Regan arrive at the old house to be greeted with what fucking else? More locusts! And while the newly evil Sharon escapes the wrecked cab to set herself on fire like the possessed woman at the start of the movie, Lamont and Regan are met with the now individualized form of the Pazuzu-possessed Regan.
He's chosen me. Pazuzu's Regan is the only Regan.
Who instead takes the more lascivious form of sexy evil Regan, in a questionable scene of erotica alongside young Linda Blair that, according to her, was supposed to be way more explicit in its original storyboarded form.
It was my makeup people. We have something to bring to your attention, that there's a new storyboard of the seduction scene. It is going to be presented, but it's extremely offensive. I went to somebody and said, let me be perfectly clear, ain't gonna happen.
17 years old, ladies and gentlemen, as directed by somebody who thought that the original Exorcist portrayed child torture. How is it that Exorcist II is way more exploitative of Linda Blair's sexuality than Rick James ever was? Pazuzu's swarm of locusts descends upon the MacNeil house and begins to break it in two, while Lamont fights with sexy evil Regan to tear the demon's heart out with his hands.
You must pluck out her evil heart.
Thus confirming Father Lamont as the next DLC character for Mortal Kombat 1. As for Regan, she helps the Locust flee from her home by making the same motion that Kakumo made to swing that noise-making thingy towards the Locust, even though she doesn't have a noise-making thingy herself, and she instead just looks like an audience member of the Arsenio Hall show. But whatever, Regan is now free of Pazuzu for good, the badly burnt Sharon Spencer is given spiritual clemency by Lamont right before she dies, and Dr. Gene Tusken struggles as much as the audience is at understanding what the hell she and we have just fucking watched.
I understand now. The world won't. Not yet.
Well, here we are, 46 years later, and I'm sad to say that the world has gotten no closer to understanding what this movie was about. Even after John Boorman went and made extensive re-edits to this film, right after its terrible reception even resulted in some riots breaking out in theaters, with the 110-minute director's recut version released on VHS in the 80s and included on the Shout Factory Blu-ray, which now ends with Regan emerging from the crumbled house and meeting eyes with Dr. Tusken outside before fading to white, with the audience having to presume that Father Lamont just died off-screen of cirrhosis of the liver, much like Richard Burton himself. And while the evil of Pazuzu may have been defeated, the evil of David Gordon Green was still yet to come in this franchise's future.
Did the power of Christ compel you?
The two genuinely great things about Exorcist II are the dreamlike cinematography from William A. Fraker of Rosemary's Baby, and the fantastic score from the legendary Ennio Morricone that replaces Mike Oldfield's famous Tubular Bells theme here, with Morricone even reincorporating Regan's theme from Exorcist II into his score for Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, which won the late great maestro his only competitive Oscar for Best Original Score. Plus, Exorcist II has an unlikely fan in its corner, Martin fucking Scorsese. Yes, the man who helped beat Exorcist Believer out of the box office listed Exorcist II as one of his guilty pleasures, that he even prefers over the first Exorcist.
What?
With all due respect to Mr. Scorsese, I personally think Exorcist II is still a confused mess that profoundly misunderstands everything that made the first film work and contains absolutely zero scares. But credit is due to John Boorman for at least making a sequel that didn't just cynically redo the first one all over again. And in spite of its many dull stretches, there's enough amusing insanity here to keep bad movie fans entertained for one of the most baffling blunders in horror movie history. And since John Boorman is still alive in 2023 at the age of 90, maybe the angry spirit of William Friedkin can make like the demon in the new Exorcist and take over the bodies of 2 Exorcist sequel directors at the same time.
Fuck them and the horse they rode in on.
On the enjoyment continuum scale from Pazuzu to Kokumo, Exorcist II: The Heretic will have you questioning your faith in this franchise right before Exorcist III ends up renewing it, and the power of Christ compels it into a 5 out of 10. I think Richard Burton can sum up my final thoughts way better than I can.
It was horrible. Utterly horrible.
And fascinating.
I'm Jesse Shade for JoBlo.com, and thanks again for watching this special Halloween edition of our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to the JoBlo Originals channel. Tell all your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We are an independent company that appreciates all of your support. And we all hope that you've had a happy Halloween this year, even after that new Exorcist sequel let us all down with that useless cameo at the end.
Is that you?
Yes, Mother, it's me, your daughter, Richard Burton.
Fuck them all!
Don't wanna be repossessed. 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 Oh no!
Have you tried praying?
Prayer?